Hi there. Welcome to Founder Bounty, another episode I'm very excited about today. Today we have Sam Pearce. Really interesting for you guys and all you founders. And make sure to like and subscribe if you do like this episode. Sam, feel free to give a quick introduction of yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here, Vlad. I'm Sam. I'm a coach. I coach individually, executive, and business coaching, and I do workshops and talks as well. My background before becoming a coach was actually in advertising, so that's where I spent a lot of my career. Um, but now I work with individuals and companies, and my real purpose is to help people to work and live joyfully, which sounds well-being-y, and it to a certain extent is, but it's not really. It's about performance. It's about business results. It's about satisfaction in life. It's about all those kind of things. So that's really what I'm here to do.
Absolutely. And I think this is a really interesting theme for a lot of founders out there and a lot of you who are trying to get your businesses up and running. And of course, you're going through the themes of, potential burnouts, fundraising, dealing with investors, managing employees. I mean, a founder has to go through a lot of different decision making, let's say on a daily basis. And those have to be quick and very important decisions, for the success of your company. So maybe we could start off a little bit about the different themes that founders and startup people have to go through just to get their business off the ground. The first of those themes I'd like to kind of focus on is really decision making. And I know, Sam, you've got
Mm-hmm.
some experience in this in yourself, and of course, being a founder myself, I've had to do that. On we're making decisions, thousands of decisions a day, which investors to go through, strategical, not strategical, which employees to hire, how to fundraise. Maybe, you could tell us a little bit about your experience and what are the best ways a founder has to manage decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'd say about any of this stuff, and decision making is really key, is that we don't exist in a vacuum. We are sponges for the experiences that we've had, for the people we know have had, for cultural norms and social myths. If you're an entrepreneur, there's one place that will have the biggest impact on you, and that is Silicon Valley. That is the
Mm-hmm.
myths of Silicon Valley are a huge part of how we view ourselves when you're starting a business, particularly if you're starting a company that isn't just you. You are living in the shadow of the Silicon Valley myths. And when you break those myths down, there's a couple that stand out above all else. I think Bill Gates is one of them, Steve Jobs is another, but these companies, Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, and all of those have these stories about people sleeping under their desks, working 20 hours a day, burning the candle at right edge, just pushing. Now, there's a couple of things here. Firstly, probably not exactly how it happened. That's the first thing. These myths. I have a theory on this, which I will share, which is if you become obscenely rich, like hundreds of billions of dollars, you need to justify why you have that wealth. And so it's a lot easier to justify when you have this story, this myth about how you earned it through this work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
also, there's a lot of people who sell a lot of things that are associated with this ways of working. So if you're starting a company, this is the predominant cultural and social heritage you will be absorbing and have absorbed in you when you think about the decisions you make and the way you work. So you're not in a vacuum. You're not starting from scratch. There is stuff you think you need to do. And the number one is hard work. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's number one. Everyone says you've got to work hard and you've got to work long hours and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I think I totally agree with you. I think a lot of every, let's say, startup kind of, entrepreneur coaching is just work hard. But that's not really
Yeah.
enough, is it? That's not really enough.
Well, not really, because I mean, firstly, everyone's doing it, and my instinct is to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. But it ignores physiology, it ignores biology. So decision making is just making choices, and there are ways we can enable ourselves to make better choices, and a lot of them are to do with our biology, and this is very much to do with fight and flight. So the rational brain, the kind of neocortex, and this is Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and slow, only makes 2 to 4% of our decisions. But the rational brain is quite required for a lot of business decisions. If you are stressed, if you are anxious, then you are in fight and flight. The rational brain is shut down when you're in fight and flight. It's simple biology. If you're working all hours of the day, if you are tired, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, you literally cannot make rational decisions. The junction box in the limbic system that sends information to the neocortex closes. So you're only making decisions emotionally. And there's a huge power to that, which we can talk about later. But it's biology. And so a lot of the ways we're working make us stupid. They just make us stupid.
Right.
So if you want to make good decisions, you've got to think about who you are being whilst you make them. Am I calm? Am I grounded? Am I aligned to my values? Do I know what is important? Do I understand what this decision is about? Do I want the results of this decision? I mean, I'm sure you've met as many people I do who ended up with a business that they don't want to run because they've made a load of decisions that may have led to success in a certain way, and then they're like, don't want this. This isn't what I wanted. Because if you make the decisions of someone else, you're going to end up with a business of someone else, not your own. So decision making for me comes down to two key principles. Who are you being whilst you make the decision? What mental, physical, emotional state you're in whilst you make it? And two, what values are you making it against? What actually matters? Because you can get some investors in, you can get some investment, but they may not be people you want to work with. They may make demands on you that you don't want to have. So first, who am I being? And that's a day-to-day piece of work. A day-to-day piece of work that I do every morning. Number two, what matters to me? Do I want to make millions? Maybe not. But those for me are the two most important things. And they require being connected to ourselves and what we want.
Absolutely. No, I think those are really interesting themes you're talking about. So it's not really just, working hard and burning yourself out will not allow you to potentially make those, decisions as clearly as maybe should be done. And, how do you think founders should really manage those decisions, and what kind of, let's say, should he be taking more breaks, more rests? So is there any particular advice you'd give to founders to really make sure those decisions are as accurate and as best as possible for themselves and for their companies?
Yeah, it's such a good question. To a certain degree, one of the sets of answers is really obvious. Exercise more, don't drink too much caffeine, meditate, take walks. Like there's one aspect which is just standard stress reduction stuff.
Right.
Like that's the kind of, you can Google like how to reduce stress and you'll find a load of stuff. Most people know it. Loads of people don't do it. The second one is I think more to do with the idea of what it is you're doing, and this is where coaching often is more of a help. If you think that your day is about ticking things off a to-do list, and most of us do, by the way, if you think that ticking stuff off a to-do list is what's most important, then you will make the decisions that will get stuff off your list the fastest. That doesn't necessarily make the best decision. It means you got it off the list fastest. And this is I have a whole workshop on busy isn't working, which is about like the pace at which we work, the way in which we work. So, for example, in my own life, I know when I'm emailing or reaching out to a client, if I rush that email, it reads differently. It's just a different email. Like they get that I just want something from them. Whereas if I'm slow and grounded and I'm writing it, it's like, how's this about them? Those are different decisions, but they're to do with how connected and grounded I am to what I'm doing. So, for example, I don't see my workload as getting stuff done. I see my priority as giving gifts each day. That's my framing for my work. When I'm in coaching one-to-one, I'm giving gifts. When I'm reaching out to clients, I'm giving gifts. Now, when you're giving a gift, is the ideal way to give a gift like run to the supermarket and like grab the first thing? No, of course it's not. It's I think about this, I think about you, what can I offer you? So the very way you see what you do, the way you see your work has a huge impact, and the pace at which you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many times when I've written an email myself and I'm thinking, you know what, how should I structure this email? I'm thinking to myself, how can I get the result that I want to get? Should I put this sentence? Should I not put this sentence? So that all relates back to what you were saying. I mean, it's so true. And I bet there's so many founders and so many people out there that are thinking the same things. hey, you know what, should I add this link, should I add the attachment, should I not add the attachment? And again, that goes back to what you were saying, about, not only taking care of your mental being, with walks and stress relief, also taking
Mm.
your time, taking a step back and actually thinking about it, right?
Yeah, just and really, really thinking about what it is you're doing and the way you want to do it. I know that I feel the temptation because a lot of coaches can be quite like business, and I know that's not my thing. That's not so. One of
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
values, one of something I speak out in a declaration every morning, is I'm gentle, loving, and kind because
Mm-hmm.
that's the
Mm-hmm.
way in which I want to grow my business. I want to work with people who want to talk about that kind of stuff. I want to work with people who are connected to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very
Mm-hmm.
tempting. I can very quickly go into what everyone else is doing. It's like, well, I'm all business. It's all results. It's like, I will help you grow your business, but I'm not going to do it by just focusing on money. That's not what I'm about. That's
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
underlining all of what we're talking about is a closer relationship with what we're actually afraid of. So reconciling ourselves to our fear. I talked about fight and flight. We're all afraid. If you're starting a business, you're afraid. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
baby on the way. I'm more afraid than I was a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
But we're afraid. I'm afraid of being a failure. I'm afraid people won't take me seriously. I'm afraid if we don't engage with these fears, they run you. And so becoming
Mm-hmm.
closely acquainted, when I'm sending this email and I'm like, I want this person to buy from me, and that's everything that's showing up. What really is showing up is I may lose my house, I may not make any money, my business may
Mm-hmm.
fail. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're not emotionally and rationally engaged with that, that's what's running the show. Busyness is
Mm-hmm.
fear. It's a fear of
Mm-hmm.
missing out, a fear of not having enough.
Absolutely. I think we wrote an article about that. And the first thing is, when you do start a business, you have to be willing to put your reputation at line,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to be attached to that business. And that's one of the first themes that, in relation to what you were just saying about, reputation, being busy, being fearful of what other people actually think about you when you start that business. And I think a lot of people are going through the same things. Like you said, not just worried about, let's say, the potential family, the baby on the way, but also the reputation
Mm-hmm.
that precedes you. Oh, I might be a failure. This business might fail. Therefore, my career will not be as successful as it could be. But at the same, and I've had that many times, Sam.
Mm.
I've been in touch, let's say, with a Swiss friend of mine, interested in, finance person, interested in starting a business. And the first thing they said is, Vlad, if this doesn't work, I'm not going to put this on my CV, right?
Mm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
afraid. I'm
Mm.
afraid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what you were talking about. If this doesn't work, I can't put this on my CV. It has to work. But we as entrepreneurs and as founders know that failure does continuously leads to success, right?
Yeah.
Failure, because you learn from your mistakes, and that's what this is about. It's a journey, right?
Yeah, it entirely is. And I think this is the thing with the fear. This is where a lot of the like absorbed behaviors kick in. Because when you're afraid and you're not sure how to do something, your brain will just search for what it's seen work before. I think this is where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the Silicon Valley, it's like, well, it worked for Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And you're
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
Steve Jobs, and it's not the 80s. And,
Mm-hmm.
like there's a whole host of things. And this is why connecting to yourself emotionally and who you want to be and how you want to do it. There's an element I know where when I put work joyfully on my, I know there's a load of corporates that are not. There's a load of people that are going to be like, that's not what I want for my. I don't need more joy. I need business results. And it's like, well, that's great, but you're probably not going to love working with me then. And owning the path that you want to take, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that the clients you attract are completely proportional to who you are being. And
Mm-hmm.
this is kind of the thing about if you decide to be someone else that doesn't feel entirely true, particularly to get business success, you'll end up with a business you don't want, a client base you don't want to work
Mm-hmm.
with, because that's
Mm-hmm.
who you're going to attract.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. So a founder and an entrepreneur also has to be quite creative in the
Yes.
way, and constantly being creative about not just how they write, for example, an email, but also about how they build their company. How can they growth hack into this space? How can they, attract those from a marketing perspective? I mean, Mark Cuban's talking about, sales, sales, sales. That's what a company is. You've got to sell yourself. And part of that is being creative, and part of that is making the right decision. So it all comes back to your emotional state, and exactly what you were saying, Sam, about, making those best decisions to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but and here's the key thing, and this isn't the easiest work always. It's the right decision for you. That's the thing that's hard. That's the
Hmm.
thing. That's the thing that's tricky. And I'm sure you do too. But I speak to founders, and sometimes they haven't thought about this. And there's no judgment for me because there's no real reason. It's like, oh, I want to start a company, and it's so obviously some people build companies to sell. That's and some people want to run it for life. But again, a company is a mirror of you.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
level of
Hmm.
introspection you're willing to go on
Hmm. Hmm.
matters
Hmm.
because the company will be like you. And so if a company's failing, I don't want to say that you're a failure. That's not the right language. But it's like inside me, how am I showing up? Like this is a perspective on the world, but how am I showing up that's creating those problems?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
owning that is it's a personal thing. You can't ignore yourself and how
Hmm.
you're being and who you're being and all these things that are so important. It's so easy to say, but they are going to show up. They're going to show up in everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you've said it. So hit the nail on the head there. I mean, a company is a slight reflection of you and your
Mm,
personality. And, having been through a couple myself, looking at how can I be the most, it's constantly a creative process about attracting clients, writing emails, looking at your investors, who you're going to hire. Everything is about attracting the right talent. But of course, the end goal for everyone is increasing revenue and the bottom line. But to do that, you have to go through this huge process of learning about yourself and learning about
mm.
what makes you the most efficient, the most creative. And I think failure, like we've said, failure is part of that journey because you start to understand, right? Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you felt loads. I've felt
yeah,
tons,
yeah.
tons, but ways to navigate that, ways to understand it, ways to free yourself from the judgment of it. It's all creativity is
Yeah,
such
it's
an
tough.
important one. Creativity is another thing that turns off when fight or flight kicks in.
Yeah, it's
This.
it's it's yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough, and I think, as you said, a lot of that getting over that. I'll be okay with failing. That's the first step in starting a company as a first time founder. But if you're a serial entrepreneur, that's part of the journey, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and there are, of course, there's investors who won't work with people who haven't had a bankruptcy or two.
Yeah.
It's part of it, but it all ties into the deeper piece for me as a coach, which is your relationship to yourself, the way you see the world, the way you see these things. We take a lot for granted,
Hmm.
and there are ways to not have to learn the lessons in such a hard way. That's kind of why coaching exists, but
Hmm.
the way you
Hmm.
see the world, the way you see your business, the way you see yourself in it, the way you see your role, all lead to different outcomes. All of them,
Hmm.
and everyone's
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
Like for mine, this is very much a lifestyle business. I work with my wife in the business, but I don't. I'm currently not looking for more employees. I love the freedom and flexibility of what I have going on, and I know someone else is different. I've got clients for whom that's completely different. They want to grow it. They
Hmm.
want to get more employees.
Hmm.
That's awesome. But the dynamics that sit underneath it, the fundamentals do not change. Who are you? How do you deal with things? How do you see what your business is? How do you see what you do is every day? This is what I mean about the gift giving thing. I know when I think I've got to reach out to clients, it's like, well, that sounds heavy and unpleasant. It's like, well, I've got to give some gifts. I'm like, that sounds awesome. It's
Hmm.
the same thing. The
Hmm.
way of seeing is completely flipped. And this is
Hmm.
true of
Hmm.
every aspect of the business. You can flip everything into something else. Hard work, working smart. They're two ways of saying the same thing. They have different outcomes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Another theme I wanted to focus on, and I think we've touched a bit, is burnouts,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you've touched on it a little bit about stress relief. I think a lot of founders out there get frustrated when clients are not coming, and signing up, whether it be a SaaS product or whether it be a hardware product, and not getting the investors, not getting the results they want. They're working so hard. Is there any kind of particular thing you could maybe advise for those founders that are kind of looking for solutions and to help avoid those burnouts? Because I think that's a really important theme, especially with early stage companies.
Yeah, I mean, burnout. I mean, I've been through a burnout when I was working in advertising. The interesting thing about burnouts is of course the fact that you don't see them coming. That's
Mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm,
there tends to be before burnout. There tends to be a period you think you're nailing it. That's the unfortunate bit. I would say so. The first thing I would say, and I have to hesitate, you know, emphasize I'm not a medical professional, but I've been through one myself, and obviously I coach people. Is if you feel you can't stop, a burnout's coming. That's the sign is the belief that you can't think you can stop.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and there's a quote I love, which is, "If you don't think you can stop, then you need to." And so that's
mm-hmm,
the first thing is to look out for it. This idea that you can't put the business down, that it'll die without you. You can't even step away for a moment. You're currently running on something that's not particularly healthy. You've lost perspective. Essentially, you're running off adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormone. That's essentially what's keeping things going. It's fight or flight to the point you're breaking, because burnout, our stress response is designed to be temporary and quite short lived. So, see a lion, run away, everything's kind of okay. What we're
mm-hmm,
not very good at processing is long term stress, having cortisol and adrenaline in our body for a long time, which is what is currently happening. So that's one of the things to look out for. The My personal perspective on burnout is to delve, and I do this a lot with my work, is to delve into the emotional bit you're ignoring. So burnout usually involves a whole load of fear, pain, and struggling. I'm failing. I'm not doing well enough. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not making it happen. If I stop, I'll fail. Those are emotional responses. And so,
mm-hmm,
to a certain extent, working like that is not enormously dissimilar in my mind to getting drunk at the end of the day, a long day. It's numbing. And so this kind of belief that if I just keep working, it'll all be okay is usually for me a sign that there's something emotionally going on that's really unpleasant.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so actually so much of it for me, and I know that I'm veering towards burnout and stress is because I'm not emotionally processing anymore. That's usually what the scene is about for me. And when I sit with a notebook in the morning, did it this morning, and I think, what am I afraid of? What am I worried about? I'm a failure. I'm going to be a bad father. I'm not going to be good enough. I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. I'm not a good enough coach. All these fears come out and I feel them, and it hurts, actually hurts inside in my heart. And that is the healthiest possible thing that can happen, is for me to feel that pain, because life is hard and it's scary. Running
Mm-hmm.
your own business is hard and it's scary. And if we don't feel that, we numb, we repress, and that is going to come out. And it's going to come out as burnout, and you're going to hurt. You need to feel things. The
Mm-hmm.
life
Mm-hmm.
is there to be experienced. Feelings are there to be felt. And if you squash them down, which is we get so used to doing, particularly when you're starting your own business, I don't know, you feel a lot of release. And I know when
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
stressed, there's something I haven't felt, some
Mm-hmm.
fear, some insecurity, some whatever. And so my mentality is feel your way out.
So I've been through a burnout as well, and I have to say, all of the points you've just said, I felt. Prior to the burnout, things are not moving quick enough. Even though, let's say, the business is doing very well, you're about to raise a round, whatever. Um, you never feel like it's moving fast enough.
Yeah.
You're basically trying to jump the gun. You're trying to move as fast as possible. So you're pushing, your mental state, your emotional state to the max. Um, and at the end of the day, it's not going to move any faster, right? You're trying to understand, you're trying to comprehend, that it's not going to
Yeah.
move any faster. There's nothing more you can do or give to yourself. And so all those things you were just talking about, I totally relate to. And I think it's really, really important to potentially take a step back and, as you've said, a couple of points to try to think about things to try to avoid the burnout. And burning out is actually an even worse, let's say, result, because you have to take a month and you're pretty much in bed for the month. You have to take a month off. You have to
Mm,
rest. Your body cannot cope, so you will lose. Right
mm.
at the end, you essentially, your company will lose, and you will mentally, uh, you know, uh, end up not well. So
The
I think
cost,
that's.
Yeah, the cost is
Yeah.
enormous.
Yeah.
And I think when you're talking about speed, like what happens when we go really fast on a roller coaster? You scream.
Hmm.
Going really fast is an emotional experience, and this is one of my huge things is that we've reduced a lot of the business world down to what is rational.
Hmm.
And rationality's got a great place. We talked about it earlier, but we're creatures of emotion. 96% of our decisions are made emotionally. We're creatures of emotion, and this is, the reason I use the word joy is specifically because it's a softer emotional word. Because in all the talk of efficiency and productivity, we are robbing ourselves of what actually life is about. Life is a emotional experience more than anything else,
Hmm.
and we're depriving ourselves of that. The need to feel, the need to experience it. None of us are rational beings. We have rationality. That's super useful. I don't want to throw that out. We're not rational beings. The 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 business world is not rational. Everyone likes to pretend it is. People make insane decisions. The fact that we're still drilling for oil and gas shows that it's not a rational business world.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think on top of that, like the economy makes way more sense if you think of it like an angry volcano god in Polynesia. We read
Hmm.
its moods. We read we have its anger in the form of recessions. We bow down to it and feed it things in growth. It's all, the economy doesn't exist. It's all make believe. We've made it into a god, and we could talk for hours about the merits of that. But our engagement with business as a whole is an emotional one, and there's rational bits, and that's great. But by cutting off so much of ourselves, we're not helping ourselves, the planet, or our businesses.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think all those points sit very well, especially with early stage founders. And I think founders and people who do start a business, and of course on my other podcast, we talked about a startup is essentially at core building a business. And a lot of people get this kind of wrong. You are, although it's a bit of a buzzword, startup building, it's cool, it's
Mm.
hip, it's always trying Google Trends, it's always trending. It's essentially you are building a business,
Mm.
and a founder has to go through one. It's very likely that your first company will fail.
Yep.
But two, all those points we were talking about, decision making, avoiding burnouts, understanding where to stop if your business is not progressing. I think that's another point. Do you have any thoughts about, you know, when would a founder or someone that's starting their business give up and say, you know what, I'm going to shut this down now? Because that's another really important, yeah.
It's a really interesting question. I, I think my question to anyone would be, what are you still doing this for?
Hmm.
What is actually leading you to continue running this business? And the reason I'd ask that question is because often it's pride, fear of failure. But I don't, only a founder can answer that question. But the reason you're doing it, if you're doing it to prove a point, if you're doing it to prove you're not a failure, like if it's any of those reasons, it's probably time to put it down. And we all hold on to things for too long. We've all been in relationships too long. We've all worked in jobs or started businesses that went on too long. And the question I
Hmm.
ask is, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to prove a point? Am I doing this because I don't want to tell my friends I failed? Am I doing this because I don't want to change my LinkedIn profile? If it's those reasons, probably a great time to put it down. But if you're doing it because you can see the light, if you're doing it because you know actually that something might change, if you're doing it, then maybe keep on in there. But this is what I come back to constantly, like the how you do something, the why you do something.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a lot of we flip it on the starting. Why are you starting this business? Is a great question that many people don't get asked and don't think about, and actually could lead to a better business idea or different experience. But I think leading into why, and I think like underpinning everything I've spoken about today, and why I've used the word joy, is we could all do with holding this way more lightly. We're starting businesses and being founders, and we take it so seriously. And what I mean by that is not that it's not important, and not that it's not important to us. It is, but there is so much freedom from perspective. This is why I mentioned the angry volcano god thing, Because if you can think about the economy like an angry volcano god, of course, there's a bit of humor to it, there's a bit of lightness to it. And when you speak about like making decisions and who you want to be in a business, etc., that lightness gives us perspective. You know, that I think it's that's an amazing quote. Life is a tragedy in close up and a comedy in long shot. I saw Rowan Atkinson talking about it the other day. He always spoke about whenever he did comedy, Mr. Bean, etc. He wanted his whole body in it because things are funny at a distance, and things are. But if you want to film a drama or a tragedy, you cut in really close, get just ahead. So this is the thing, like pull the distance in. Like, and I say this, loving my business. Everything we're doing is kind of bullshit, and I don't mean that to dismiss it. I mean that to make it all the more awesome. Because it means you get to have fun with it. It means you get to be creative because it's all nonsense. You know, with the whole economy is bullshit. We're floating on a marble in infinite nothing. And we think this stuff's so important and so serious. It's like, well, no, what if we bring some lightness to it? What would be possible if we actually just took some perspective and went, you know what, it's going to be okay. Maybe I can have some fun. Usain Bolt always smiled when he ran. And I think there's an amazing lesson in that.
Well, I think in relation to what you were saying, from a business perspective and an entrepreneur perspective, it's okay, one, to copy other businesses. It's okay because entrepreneurs are so scared. No, I want to build, the most revolutionary type of new Uber for XYZ. If a business has been proven, it's usually bound to work somewhere else. Or if you're trying to squeeze into $1 billion market, that's okay. And number two is it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. And, and I think first time founders, a lot of the time do go for I want to completely change the world and then realize, we're all not that smart. And most of us do end up copying some pivoting version of another business. Correct me if I'm wrong. Right.
No, I completely agree. I think one of the things I think it's about being a father. Part of the reason I want to be a father is because I want to find out who I am at the end of it. I want to find out who I am through it. And I think sometimes not thinking about changing the world, but changing yourself. It's like, how will I change through this business? Who will I become? That's how that was the key to me really engaging with fatherhood in advance of it coming. It's like, I want to find out who I am through this. And building a business is just another opportunity of doing that. It's one of the best opportunities. Is I want to find out who I am through building this business. What an awesome, fun journey that is. Rather than, as you say, I need to like leave my imprint on the world. Do you know what? Everyone's doing that, and it's awful. We need less. Absolutely. We need less imprints.
Absolutely.
On the
world. Absolutely. It's okay to start with a side hustle. If you're working, 8-hour days and you want to try something in the evening, it's okay. And if you fail at it, I think that's absolutely fine because you will learn something through that journey.
Yeah, you'll be different.
And if you do copy someone else's idea, that's okay too. Or end up being a competitor of a $1 billion brand, that's okay too. So
absolutely.
Sam, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I think this, there's a lot of people that are going to be super interested in this episode. Love to have you on again. And thank you very much for your time today.
Sure. Thanks so much, Vlad.
Thanks.